There are two passages which Christianity says suggest that the day for having church is actually Sunday, or what the Scriptures call the first of the week. And I know that some Messianics have reasoned that first of the week is actually referring to Saturday, but that's another teaching for another time. A plain reading of the text indicates that the first of the week means Sunday. So the first passage is 1 Corinthians 16, where Paul's giving instructions about fundraising for the believers in Jerusalem. And in verses 1 and 2, he says, "And concerning the money collection that is for the Kadoshim, on every first day of the week, let each one of you lay something aside by himself, treasuring up whatever he may have prospered, so that when I come, the collections may not be made." So while a gathering of some sort might be implied here, the text never comes out and says this. All it says is that the believers are to set aside a portion of their earnings on every first day of the week, so that Paul won't have to take up a collection when he comes. It doesn't say to gather together every Sunday to collect everyone's funds and then store it in one place until Paul returns. It's not like they had a church bank account that they could deposit checks into. But even if this was what Paul was saying, to come together for money collection, that doesn't mean that money collection is the same thing as a gathering aimed at the building up of the called forth. So the fact that he designates the first day of the week for this purpose may be more pragmatic than anything else. Maybe he's encouraging giving from the first fruits of our labor rather than the end of the work week. Who knows? All we know is that he never indicates why he chose the first day, and it certainly doesn't point to a Sunday worship service. So this first passage that's believed to imply that church meets on Sunday falls pretty short. The other passage that Christianity often points to in support of Sunday church is Acts chapter 20, which has a little more meat on it. Paul says in verse 7, "And on the first of the week, when we had been gathered together to break bread, Paul was discussing with them." So here we finally have a passage that talks about the gathering of the believers, which includes the breaking of the bread, and it says that it took place on the first of the week, again, meaning Sunday. But that's not the end of the story. The verse immediately continues, saying, "And being about to depart on the next day, he was also continuing the words until midnight. And there were many oil lamps in the upper room where they were gathered together." Jumping down to verse 11, "And having broken the bread, and having tasted of it, having also talked for a long time until daylight, in this way Paul went away." So what this passage is describing is a time when Paul had been staying with the called forth of a certain place for a while, and then the day before he was going to leave, which happened to be the first day of the week, he spent time breaking bread with them, not receiving a communion wafer, but sharing a meal. And he was talking with them, but not in the morning or afternoon, it was in the evening, and he continued through the night until the next day. So while the passage is describing a gathering of believers, it's not describing a church service or a formal gathering of the called forth. Paul was simply eating and talking and spending time with them before going away for an indefinite period of time. That's all this is. And the fact that this took place in the evening following the first day of the week is incidental to the account. The passage would have the same exact meaning if it had taken place on a Tuesday. So if there's even the slightest takeaway here that might help us determine when the called forth can meet, it would be that a gathering is hardly limited to a sliver of time on a Sunday.